Hey, everyone out there in streaming land, welcome back to Streaming Media Connect 2024. I am your Munster of ceremonies, Evan Shapiro, your media cartographer. This is a really good panel that we have here, delivering live streaming experiences that scale. Before we get to the panel, I want to thank our diamond sponsor of Streaming Media Connect 2024, Native Frame. Steve, let's roll their video. Thanks so much to our diamond sponsor, Native Frame, and also to our sponsor for this panel, Norsk by Ideas, which is spelled with a 3, which makes it incredibly hard to pronounce. But thank you very much, Norsk by Ideas. Before we get into the panel, reminder, if you are the first to be here at the end of the panel and have named the band and the music that was playing as we walked up here, which happened to be both of the same thing in this panel, you'll win a $50 gift card. Put your questions in the Q&A, look in the chat for links. And now, without further ado, let's get to this panel, streaming experiences that scale. I want to bring to the stage our great moderator, Nadine Krefetz, who is an editor-at-large for Streaming Media Connect and a really great consultant in the space. Thanks, Nadine. Break a leg.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Evan. And we've got a number of interesting types of speakers here today. Let's have everyone turn their cameras on. We've got Joe, Steph, Russell, CJ, and Dom. And today, I think one of the interesting things is that live streaming used to mean something slightly different. And those guys used to look so nervous whenever I met them at a conference, because basically they had to leave whatever live thing that they were doing to be at the conference. But let's do a round of intros and figure out exactly what live streaming means to these different people who are here. Why don't we start off with Dom, who is actually also the sponsor and has been in the streaming industry for a few years.
Yeah, just a few years, yeah. So I'm sure a few people on the webinar in the audience will know me. So my name is Dom Robinson. I'm the Chief Biz Dev Officer for Ideas. We have a product called Norsk. So Ideas empowers businesses to create high quality, reliable streaming experiences with ease. For more than 10 years, we've built resilient custom video workflows for global leaders like NASDAQ, Arqiva, and DAZN. Ideas solutions have always been good on a bad day. They keep running even when servers or regions in clouds fail. And in 2023, we took that expertise and experience and made it available as a product, a programmable live media engine called Norsk Core. And this year, we introduced Norsk Studio, the industry's first no-code live media workflow server with a user-friendly drag-and-drop interface. So, yeah, as Nadine says, I've been doing webcasts since I think I did my first one in 1996, although if I'm being picky, I could go back to 1990. And some of you will know me because I've been writing for Streaming Media magazine since 2002, and I occasionally wear another hat and run a trade association called Greening of Streaming, but we're not here to talk about that today.
Okay, excellent. Okay, how about you, Russ? Why don't you introduce yourself and the kind of streaming that you're doing?
Sure, I'm Russell. I'm the CEO and founder of BeLive. We specialize in event streaming, and direct-to-consumer platforms. So we do quite a bit of the big fashion shows like Dior, Balenciaga, Ralph Lauren, all the big fashion shows. We also run 6 different OTT channels for our clients that we also do some production for, American Kennel Club, so AKC TV, Perfect Game TV, Mint Comedy, Clash TV, Telfar TV, and so we have our own content management system that we run to help manage all the assets, the video assets, and the workflow and monetization across all of those clients, as well on the web, as well as apps, as well as fast channels. So we take a very broadcast approach to live streaming, and we serve some of the biggest clients on the globe, and we do a lot of big live events, concerts, fashion shows, sporting events, and we do big American Kennel Club National Championship. So we do a lot of television production as well as live streaming at the same time. So it's like an omni-media approach.
Okay, excellent. Now, Joe, you and DAZN and Team Whistle have a bit of explanation to tell us how live and you work together. Why don't you give us some background?
Sure. I'm Joe Caporoso. I'm the president of Team Whistle. We're a social media publisher that predominantly generates our content off platform on YouTube, Snapchat, Instagram, TikTok, Twitter. However, since being acquired by DAZN a couple of years ago, we've been working really closely with them on how do we generate engagement and awareness around all the different events that they live stream globally, both within the app and off the app, to create as much awareness as possible across all the countries that they're streaming games in. So we're doing both at the same time now, and with each passing month, getting a little more integrated into the broader streaming ecosystem and how we up-level the experience for all of the users.
Perfect. And I have to apologize. There's some construction going on, which hopefully you're not listening to. Steph, how about giving us a little bit more insight into AWS and your role there?
Sure. So I'm Steph Loone, for those who don't know me. I am the global leader at AWS for the solution architecture team for media, entertainment, games, and sports for our industry business unit. What that really means is I work with all of our great and amazing media and entertainment customers to work on helping solve some of their biggest challenges and problems in the industry. And that could be anything from direct to consumer or media supply chain, live streaming, Gen AI, data science and analytics for media. So lots of different ways that we can help solve our customers' problems. Inclusive monetization was, I think, mentioned by someone else as well. So got a great team of solution architects that come in and work with the customers to help produce some of the largest events that you see today in live streaming.
Okay, now one of the things I think that we talked about earlier in our planning call was enterprise versus live, and CJ has got a lot of experience in the monetization of live content. Why don't you give us a little bit of background, CJ?
Yeah, no, my background really is all things ad operations and monetization for publishers, from local TV station groups to NBC. Sat through Olympics and live live events like that. I've ridden the coattails of some colleagues of mine to get to see all those experiences. But also whether it's live like the Olympics or the DNC versus even live scheduled. There's different challenges in that space. So similar tech, but same challenges. So my background again is ad operations, and I'm an independent consultant in the space, kind of just looking to help folks monetize any glass, any stream, any whatever they need to turn a dollar. So.
Okay, perfect. Now, one of the most important parts actually is obviously making sure the stream is delivered, but then we also have to make sure that the stream is making money. Now, preparing for a live stream means probably a little bit of a different thing to almost everyone here, but I asked everyone to figure out what are the top 3 things they need to think about when they're preparing for a live stream. And of course, I know one person's going to go, oh, well, I also agree with that person. But Steph, why don't we start with you? So you're preparing for a live stream. What are the 3 things you think about that you really have to plan for?
Sure. And I'm glad you asked me the question. Unfortunately, I'm an overachiever, and so I picked 5 things. So
okay.
I couldn't to the script, sorry. But because we work with multiple customers and we work backwards from their business objectives, the type of event also determines what you kind of think about around what needs to be delivered and what you're thinking about with an event. So, for example, like Prime Video delivers tens of thousands of events a year at a large scale to make, Thursday Night Football look seamless, right? Peacock delivered that wild card game to like 27.6 million viewers. We have cricket, right? We have NBCU that just delivered the Olympics. So those are big customers, but then you also have news organizations that run like a 24/7 channel or other things. So when I take a step back and I think about all the different things when it comes to live streaming, I think about, one, the stream itself, right? where does it need to be? Where does it need to be distributed to? Because depending on the type of event, a lot of things could be happening to that. To the revenue components, right? How is the customer monetizing this? So the ads, the ad elements, for example, for interactive ads. Security, right? Especially in big events. For us at Amazon, security is job zero. So thinking through things like, DDoS attacks, right? And then, other complementary elements that require scaling. So with some of our customers, they have paywalls or they have registration. And so not forgetting about things like reg systems and billing systems and data collection mechanisms and logging. And then I think the last thing I'll say before we move on to somebody else is just redundancy, right? That ability to deliver seamlessly to the consumer and fail over when things fail, because things do fail during live events, and the ability to monitor that at every step of the way.
Okay, excellent. And, I know that some people are going to duplicate themselves, but you can definitely also tell us why the thing that you're mentioning is important to you. But CJ, I know that you're in a slightly different area. So when you talk about prepping and monetization, what are the three things that you think about for live?
More of my world would be more tactical. As far as whether to Steph's point of whether it's the Olympics or it's a live scheduled 24/7 news channel, I think you have to look at it a little differently, but it's still the core elements of orchestration. If it's a fast channel, it's serving live, how is everything firing with the SSAI vendor, whether it's Media Tailor or it's some Terra or Whirl or whomever whomever is out there. The Q points in the HLS, that's an important element that you take for granted, I think, sometimes when it doesn't fire correctly in VOD or it doesn't fire correctly in, the last channel in the EPG, no one's really paying attention. But when all eyes are on that event, orchestration with your cohorts in content to do a test stream. We used to do a dress rehearsal at NBC. I'm sure they still do. I won't. Steph knows better than I at this point, but they used to do a dress rehearsal for every event. I believe they still do that. I think this year the big thing was adding programmatic in. When I heard that recently at the Freewheel Summit, I was floored that was we were there, and that they were doing that. So I think of the three things, it's orchestration, not only of a test run, but it's also your counterparts. Who are you going to call when things go down? What is, when you're sitting in the war room, they don't do a war room now anymore. I don't think at NBC, but there was a war room and Freewheel was on the line. Everyone was ready to go all hours of the day, right? For smaller opportunities, like not smaller, but 24/7 news, that may be, just who's on call that day. So the orchestration element is a big deal, not only in the tech, but also in the personnel. So I'll count that as two. I think also, looking at the event, who's coming in the door. So whether it's a direct campaign that's trafficked in your own ad server and who's running and they bought that time, or if it's a programmatic advertiser that, maybe it's not your big tentpole event, but it's, you still want to review who's coming through the pipes. I think those would be the three things, that I would orchestration of tech people and the advertising coming through.
Actually, so I just want to clarify this for me, actually, maybe for other people. So when you say who's coming in, what does that mean exactly?
Well, so the orchestration of systems includes ad servers, SSPs, and so who's set up to monetize that stream. Have you, again, for the Olympics, I imagine it was very, very structured how they would have tested, and they would have it would be very much an opt-in list that would get any of that inventory programmatically. I'm making an assumption, but I think I can fairly say that. Whereas in prior lives with some of the streaming channels that I worked with, it was very much an opt-out. So if you, if there was a THC ad or CBD ad, that was coming through, you would, you might catch the odd one in a situation like a big tentpole live event that's using programmatic. You're going to be sitting there going, okay, every domain, every block opportunity, you're going to work with Magnite on, you're probably going to, focus on one SSP, keep the pipes clean, so to speak. There's just a lot that can happen with even just an ad server doing a one-to-one, call. Then when you add in the element of programmatic, it's, that's why people get concerned. It's not something you can't manage, but it's the controls have gotten so much better over the last 10, 15 years since its inception that I think people are getting more and more. Obviously, NBC is far more comfortable now than they were the last time I talked to anyone there about putting
Okay.
programmatic in the streams.
Excellent. Okay. And I think what's great about this panel is that because CJ is discussing some of the monetization things, that maybe a panel that just dealt with the technical aspects of live streaming wouldn't have. There's a kind of a more of a diversity of opinion here. But let's go, Dom. We talked about the difference between the enterprise and the actual live event, but what do you think about when you're preparing for your clients?
I was just contemplating. I mean, I think the points that have already been made by both Steph and CJ, I think they're really valid. You know, redundancy, risk assessment, making sure that the risk assessment's not just in the data plane, but it's in the control plane and all the ancillary services, making sure we avoid spoffs and things. I think they're reasonably sort of easy tick box exercises. Some of the sort of gotchas, you know, it used to be contribution feed connectivity. That was always the you know, first 10 years of streaming, it was all about contribution feed. And then I think it sort of matured into spoffs as audiences started growing, and we had, you know, it was always a subscription authentication system which took down the big events or something daft like that, which nobody was expecting. As Russell said earlier, database correlations or database-based systems tend to feel the heat and so on. I think these days, one of the gotchas which I've seen, one of the gotchas that I've seen is music copyright and trademark copyright infringement.
Oh, interesting.
So during the pandemic, you know, there were a lot of people who just thought, do my live music, I can't go and perform at the local event, I can't go and do my gig or my concert or whatever it is, and they took themselves online. And their streaming providers were being bullied by whatever rights society it was to make sure that rock musicians couldn't make a living online. And so I think there's an awful, it's all too easy to trip over a hazard like that. You get to the point where your stream's running live, you're on social media platforms, whatever it may be, and suddenly things go dark because you've tripped a trademark infringement or tripped a copyright infringement somehow.
All right.
So I think there's new challenges appearing and so on. And you know, let's come back to enterprise later. I think there's a wealth of stuff to talk about in enterprise.
Okay, excellent.
I just got a nudge offline there. SPOF is a single point of failure, so I might not have spelled that out.
Okay, all right. New acronym. So, Joe, how about you? When you're thinking about kind of the prep work for what you guys are doing, what are some of the things you think about?
It's a little bit of a different approach and answer for me, because it's a little bit more built around awareness and secondary options to the primary live stream. So first thing we're thinking about is how do we use all of our available resources, both internally and externally, to generate awareness of tune-in time, of the distribution endpoints, of what we're broadcasting, when and where, and how you can access it. How do we use social? How do we use creators? How do we use content to create awareness of that? Secondarily, how do we use the other tools that we have built within the broader streaming app? We have a product called Fan Zone that allows a second screen experience where there's live polling, betting, gaming that goes on concurrently with the live stream. How do we make sure that that is ready to go? If there's a brand sponsor, how are they integrated into it in a way that adds as much value to them as possible? And then from a measurement perspective, how are we measuring the impact, not just of the overall viewership, but of the engagement we're driving with the second screen product, of the ability to bring people from outside the walled garden of the app or where we're streaming into that ecosystem? What do those metrics look like? And then still last but not least is everything buttoned up from a distribution standpoint where there's going to be no lapses in anything from an audio or visual perspective, no lagging. And if there are any issues, are we properly queued up and ready to go from a customer service perspective, on social, on any endpoints we have to communicate with our fans to address them as quickly as possible? And we'll have teams sort of concurrently working on any concerns that are addressed while also doing their best to scope out any piracy concerns and anyone who's, you know, streaming one of the fights we have on Reddit or on Twitter, some of the platforms that have gotten a little more loose with taking that stuff down. We have to be that much more proactive with it. So it's a mix of generating engagement and awareness for the main event while also keeping an eye on the technical components of the main events and making sure that we're being responsive to the audience around it.
Now, Russell, I know that when we were talking, when we on the planning call, we talked about your distribution to a lot of different environments, a lot of social platforms, a lot of environments, also kind of focuses you on what you think about when you start planning. But do you want to cover some of the things you think about when you start planning for live? And
it's different. I said I was going to. Sorry, I was muted. I think everybody made some really great points, and I think I agree with most of them. And for us, it really depends on the type of the project it is, because we're usually a provider for the brand. So if we're doing the production and we're doing a transmission and we're doing encoding, then the things that we think about is the complexity of the stream, namely where the audience is, where they're coming from, and you know what we can do to make sure they have the best possible experience. Some of our brands, you know, we always start with goals, right? Like we're live streaming for a purpose. It's like, this isn't just to get impressions. It's about, we need to help them drive their business forward. So for fashion, you know, it's all about, sometimes it's as simple as collecting email addresses. Sometimes it's all about just, you know, being, you know, as wide as you can be. So the things we really worry about is redundancy in our planning, is redundancy in transmission. Making sure that audio and video are perfectly synced. We have three, for most of the events we do, we have 3 paths out of the venue, because it's not usually, you know, it's usually a venue, right? Like it's a convention center or a concert hall or Lincoln Center or, you know, Carnegie Hall or something like that. And so getting the signal out of there is something that we take very seriously. So sometimes we even roll satellite trucks. I know it may sound crazy to this world, but sometimes we do that. Because it's effective and we know it works, and we do it. So redundancy on transmission, redundancy on the primary and secondary encoding systems is very important to make sure that we don't get latency issues, especially if there's multiple hops coming from these locations. Like if we do streams for, you know, that can be happening in Morocco for like Dior. And so we have to get multiple signals out of Morocco, which is not easy, you know. So we do, you know, 3 different paths. We almost always do a bonded cellular, like a live view. We almost always do some type of bandwidth on site dedicated that's not shared, not on Wi-Fi. And then, you know, the third path is either an on-site encode or a separate approach, whether it be satellite or IP over satellite. And then we worry about, you know, the complexity of where we're going. If we're going to Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, YouTube, and their own site, as well as syndication partners for blogs and all that. And if there's something like an ad unit being called for pre-roll, then we need to understand how that works, right? And so we need to test it. So we don't have a lot of control over what happens, you know, but what we do have control over is if that SCUDdy 35 trigger fires, and making sure that it happens at a time where it's not abrupt. It's not in the middle of a sentence. It's not in the middle of the action. So that's tricky. And then on the distribution side, it's making sure that we have all the right, languages and credentials in place to actually stream to, because we do a wide, we do something that's a little unique, where we're streaming to all these social platforms, including ones in APAC that you've never heard of, like Cacao, and, like there's a line, and so it's quite complicated to manage all those streams. It's, we're not using like a restream or something. It's, we have to actually physically log into them all. We do use Restream. It's a great product, but not for that. But, and then, we have to manage, making sure that these days, horizontal and vertical is a big thing. So we try to make it work natively on the platform it's supposed to be. So we're not sending, unless the client wants it with the backplate, we're not sending a 16:9 video to Instagram Live. We're sending a 9:16. So like we try to really think that through, and then the video workflow coming out of the router that goes into the encoders, we take that very seriously, and we try to make the video as highest quality as possible. So we're not resizing, our brands, our clients care quite a bit about, being able to see the fabric and the colors and in fashion, and then with dogs and different things. It's like we take image quality very serious. So those are the big 3 things that we worry about: is the audience, where they are in the world, transmission, redundancy, and then making sure the complexity of the stream, like everybody else mentioned, is like if there's a paywall, we try to test that at 5x the amount of people we think are going to come in, because they're always problematic. Not always, but like, there's always a surprise. Like there's something can go wrong because it's hitting 3 different change. It could be hitting Stripe. It could be hitting this. It's hitting this. There's like a waterfall, we call it, of like these things it hits. And one of them adding 2-3 seconds of time can be a big problem for clients like ours, where things, where when it's the opening frame is very well thought out. It's not just like we'll just happen to dip in here. We have clients like that, we're working, for a partner of ours to do the DNC, where they're just doing streams like, 70 different streams are happening right now. So they're going to all different places, open entry points, and it's quite complicated. So those are the things that we worry about.
And it's interesting because Steph, we talked about this just before the call, and I think I want to get a little bit more background. So Russell talked about authentication and what happens. What are the problems that get generated?
Yeah, well, so, in my experience, I probably should have also added, so prior to AWS, I was 25 years with the company called Paramount. And for the last 8 years there, I was the SVP of engineering for CBS Sports Digital, and ran several Super Bowls. And so I've had a lot of actually personal hands-on experience with live streaming events of that nature. So, a lot of what you see can be expected or unexpected. So a lot of the services that my team was responsible for in my prior role at CBS Sports, they were free services. And so not necessarily having a registration system in front of them. However, if you had a poll or something else that required a registration element or a component to it, and you got that like stampede, the stampeding herd of people that would come in all at one time, or a promotion comes on live and says, hey, make sure you register and sign up for X, and you have that stampede coming into those registration systems or those billing systems, especially you see that in like paid services where the stream's about to go live within, probably 10 minutes of the stream. Everybody's like, oh yeah, I want to buy that, or oh, I need to pay for that. And if you're not thinking properly about scaling those ancillary systems, you haven't even, the consumer doesn't even get to the start, the start gate to even be able to see the content, let alone start worrying then about those other, larger issues in stream, like, and I think a couple people brought this up, but like the originating source, like how many originating contribution feeds do I have coming in? The black frame, do I have audio? Do I have audio on the right channels, right? Is there any kind of issue with the actual ingest coming in that, is there latency coming from the source, right? I think about during those larger events, let's say you get past all those initial hurdles of getting the people actually into the stream, things like the health of the services and the partners that you're also utilizing, and the quality of their services or the quality of the experiences that your customers are seeing as well. And then, for me, depending upon what the customer's objective is or the outcome is, right? Are the feeds making it to the right distribution points for things like the highlight clipping or content curation for different types of distribution? So a lot of those things are the things I think about as the live stream is going on. And it really depends, as well on the objective of the customer.
Okay. And obviously, if people can't get in, everything else doesn't really matter.
Nothing matters.
No, exactly. Dom, when you talk with your customers, is that something that they are aware of, or do you spend a bunch of time kind of giving them a background as to the, both the registration as well as any kind of monetization aspect or authentication has to work first and before everything else?
So these days, I think we provide platforms. So we're dealing with tens, if not hundreds of thousands of events a year, many times hundreds of events concurrently. So it's got to be really cookie cutter by the time we're doing that type of volume of live eventing. In an ideal world, once the event's live, I don't want to be thinking about it. It's the eye of the storm. It's the moment, the last 3 months of preparation. If I'm the DOP or the point man for the event, it's the moment where I sit back, I press go, and ideally that's the bit where I do nothing because it's all working. I need to think of my my supply chain and my line of command through that supply chain, where my roles and responsibilities begin and end. But I think my thinking from personal experience, I think the biggest concern I have when I'm running a big live one-to-many stream, and it's it's not a cookie cutter event, it's a one-off. I think I worry that where I've got redundancy and failover, can my redundancy partners actually handle it if the other partner dies? If CDN A dies, can CDN B actually handle 100% of the traffic, or are they also expecting to be doing a massive software download for one of their other customers at that moment in time? It's all well and good to be able to spread your load across two or three CDNs or whatever it is, but if one of them goes up in a puff of smoke, or if one of the clouds has an availability zone outage, can I move all of that traffic onto either another part of their cloud or onto another provider, or will I find out that at that point in time that other provider was already bursting at the seams and actually half my traffic's got to go out the window? So those are the things which I would say keep me awake at night, but no, they keep me awake in the middle of the stream, which I probably shouldn't be. Anyway, but those are the things that concern me.
Does anybody else have anything that they want to talk about in terms of redundancy planning? Because I was going to move on to another topic, but I want to make sure that we've covered all the things that you're thinking about.
I can chip in. Sorry, Nadine, I can just chip in just to continue the point I was making a little bit. One of the things that I think is classic is people don't expect things like a software update to get pushed out in the middle of their major town hall or their update. It's wonderful how often your operating system suddenly requires an update in the middle of mission critical event that you've been planning for, or and you suddenly find half of the marketing department are going, but my machine's updating and I can't.
Okay, but let's clarify that. So who's doing the software update? Because you didn't. I know what you mean,
some third party, and I'm trying not to name names and point fingers here across the
industry,
operating
but some
system
third party,
or
an
operating system vendor has just decided you need an update to some key part of your kernel in the middle of the CEO's town hall or whatever it is, and that's the sort of thing which is really hard to plan for, and in certain circumstances can really bring the show down. And live is live. If you miss the moment, it's gone. So those are difficult.
I have a question actually from someone in the audience, and Wasim asks, going back to the stampede or join flood aspect, and John, we talked a little bit about this in terms of the enterprise side, but for anybody who actually wants to answer this, what measures are in place to manage these conditions, like a 503 error? Is there a holding lobby space with information to the user presented? So I'm going to assume that a lot of you guys do that, but is that still common?
Well, we try not to have a holding slate, but we do have that, but that's for emergency. Really what it's about is making sure that you have very simple things on the edge, that the users are consuming, very, very cacheable, simple things, it's like, that's the way our system works, is like, it's all cached, and the speed apps control, what you ask for and where you go to get it, and making sure that you have enough of that's a very simple process, but it's best to over provision that. But that's a problem, is making sure, because even for us, like, there's like nobody on this website, and then at 4 o'clock there's 10,000, even 10,000 people. And so like our clients, we have an embed code, right? So they trust us to make sure that we don't crash there. It doesn't really happen a lot these days, but knock on wood, but that's what we have to make sure of, is that our stuff is dead simple, tight, and like is distributable, right? So it's not it's not hitting a database, it's not hitting too many things. It's just kind of like, here's your MU38 stream, you know what I mean? Like, and here's the metadata, and like, and then, so we try to keep things as simple as possible on the edge of where the users are actually connecting to us from. And I think that's been a learning experience, but it's been critical, because going from 0 to 100,000 in 2 minutes is hard for any system.
Okay. Anybody else want to speak to that before I move on to another topic? CJ.
I think from the or Dom, I'm going to speak to this, though Steph is probably dealing with this with her clients right now, but one of the things is the concurrence and the advertising like supply chain. So as you're, when everyone logs on for NASCAR at 4 o'clock on Sunday, all of a sudden, it's a big, Daytona 500 or it's Super Bowl, right? Like being able to manage those concurrents, because every time, whether it's a pre-roll, it's a mid-roll, there's a break, the calls that have to be made create QPS for the ad servers, and if you have programmatic in there for the SSPs, and then and then so forth out to the demand side platforms, right? The entire supply chain for advertising. And when you do that, you can actually stop advertising altogether because it looks like it's fraudulent. People don't know how to handle a QPS spike like that. That number of concurrence just has a ripple effect that you have to manage. And Steph, I don't know if there's more you want to speak to on that. I just know that's recent events that we had myself and my colleague Susie, me, and we had been talking to folks that remains a major issue, not just for the stream itself, but for the reliance on the monetization supply path to give those ads back.
Yeah, I think I'll throw one more thing in. I think it's a lot of people do not really operate their own platforms. They're using, a paid monthly service with this many hours of transcode and blah, blah, blah. So, I mean, having people that can disable things and actually have fingers on keyboards is critical for our kinds of events. And, if we had some ad call that was chugging and wasn't, we will disable it and do a refresh and push out a forced refresh to make sure everybody gets the stream back on. Hopefully we do that kind of stuff before the client even realizes and before the public can even know. But that's a big thing. I mean, that's what we like to think differentiates ourselves, is like we actually have people that can access the actual platform and say, well, that secondary CDN is not working, so stop throwing traffic to it. You know what I mean? Like, if we can disable those things in real time, or DRM is hanging in Europe or something. So, that probably can't be disabled in real time. But like, there's the things like that we can actually fix and simplify and keep things running. And that's, for a bespoke, smaller company like us, that's where we really shine, is because we can actually, we don't just call our partner and hope to get on the diamond, support, queue and hope to get a call back, because most of these platforms don't have that kind of.
Okay, let's go to the platform person. So Stephanie, in terms of, is this a common approach, or is this kind of an outlier in terms of how people manage something like the ad calls?
So look, in my experience, when I was actually on the customer side, we were very risk averse. And so actually ran multiple Super Bowls with, it was a very prescriptive, almost a manual process. And part of that is because of the way that we sold the advertising. So as an example, the national advertising and what would be in the local pods, they would have to match. And so we did some very prescriptive things, which allowed us to circumvent some of the programmatic things that Susie was talking about. I would always think about simplicity and where can we take everything down to the lowest common denominator. And you can add complexity from there, but always know that you can strip yourself back down to the lowest common denominator, and that everybody at least gets an experience and that everybody at least gets an ad. And so, I would say that there's a bunch of different approaches to how to get to that point. But I've seen, we made in my prior role, we made some very deliberate choices of how we were going to handle advertising to ensure that delivery would always occur. And I agree, getting to the most simple basics and getting things simplistic and out at the edge is the best way to do this, to be able to deliver a good quality of experience for the customer.
Okay, perfect. And Dom, why don't you say the last thing before we move to Joe, because I want to make sure we include Joe in this conversation.
No, absolutely. Sorry, Joe. Happy to step back if you want. I was just going to throw in a sort of more anecdotal story. I remember working on a live webcast where there was a sort of lot of emphasis on personalized advertising as the sort of pre-roll first thing that the audience contacted. And there was actually, when we looked into it, there was actually only a catalogue of about 20 different adverts And so rather than trying to make a decision for each of the, whatever it was, 25, 50,000 people joining the stream and go through that computational process, we just prepared 25 different header M3U8 files, and that was what we pre-cached, and that's what we delivered, and then it handed over to the live stream. There was no computation on the fly. It looked personalized and it sort of felt personalized, but actually it worked around the problem by pre-positioning content. And quite often there are tips and tricks like that you can, if you explore the workflow in depth, you can really take pressure off core systems if you're smart with it. Sorry, Joe.
Okay, no, that's okay. I just want to make sure we start talking a little bit also about the user experience, about what you're planning for that, because, you know, there's the technical aspect of it, but there's also somebody viewing on the other end. Joe, how about you? What are you thinking about in terms of when you're planning for a better user experience, when you're trying to engage people, and what you've got in terms of, you've got different environments, and you've also got a content that you possibly are serving in different forums, I should say.
Yeah, we just want to create as many forums as possible where people can engage and give us direct feedback in real time to what they're seeing. So for as many of the games and matches that we're broadcasting, and all of the different countries and all the different leagues come with certain limitations about what we can and can't do, where you can and can't integrate advertising and a second screen experience. How do we navigate that to create a consistent forum where, if we want to do a live poll, if we want to do a live bet or a live game challenge, how do we set that up and how do we prompt it throughout the game that drives as much interactivity as possible and enhances the experience of watching and consuming the game? Most people are always going to be looking at a second screen anyway when they're watching a live stream event. How do we keep that second screen within the broader app that they're already there? That way they're not spending that second screen time off platform, but on platform. And then in advance of the event and after the event, how do we use off platform to show some of the different things that may have been missed and create awareness of what is coming up next and keep the audience's attention when there is not necessarily a live event or live game on? That's one of the bigger challenges that we're tasked to fill. It's easy to get someone in the door to watch a Premier League game, but how do you keep them entertained between the two Premier League games or when there's no game on? How do you create an experience for them in the app during the game, but also before and after the game, and then off platform that's going to prompt them to get back in time for the next outing? And we need to make sure that that experience is as seamless as possible for the customer and the user if they're going to take the leap to subscribe or pay for a pay-per-view for us and not, you know, go the route of trying to find the stream somewhere else, whether legally or illegally. So how do we go about doing that and enhancing the overall fan experience?
So Joe, like, what's one of the most popular types of interactivity that you can offer the fans?
We've had a lot of success with the new Fan Zone tool that DAZN has been testing throughout the year. We've been able to integrate sponsors into it like Visa, which is effectively a hub within the app for fans where they can compete for different giveaways, give their different reactions in real time to the game. We could filter through different athletes and influencers there to kind of like have a second screen, almost like Manning cast type experience where they're watching and commentating on the game alongside the fans. And it's been encouraging early signs for that. And now it's how do we do it with as many sports and as many markets as possible? And then how do we bring other elements to the app that mirror some of the most successful components of it? Are we seeing more success with gaming, with pool, you know, with different like challenges, or are we seeing it more when we bring in like an athlete or an influencer to speak and engage with the fans? How do we do that in as many places and as many markets as possible?
So, and another aspect of this, in fact, Joe, I'm sure you have to do this, and in fact, I'm sure all of you have to do this, is some accessibility on your streams. And I mean, Joe, do you want to just talk to a little bit more about the accessibility that you include in some of your activities, or do you want to talk about captioning?
I mean, I think focusing on accessibility has definitely been a priority for us. How do we ease the user journey and user experience once they get in the app to find what we're broadcasting, and how do we get them to stay there? And what are the prompts to get them within the app, whether that's served via email or via other off-platform means? So enhancing accessibility, I think, is something that, you know, our tech side is always looking at. How do we make the steps and the user experience to getting in sort of the ecosystem where we're streaming all of these events as seamless as possible and not as clunky as possible? How do you sign up in as few clicks as possible? And how do you actually get into a spot where you're watching and engaging overall?
Okay, and the other thing, I think, Dom, you and I talked about captioning and captioning delays. Give us a little background on that.
Yeah, so I mean, with the Norsk platform, it's reasonably easy to loop in third-party audio to text caption generation. It's almost invariable that, particularly when it comes to financial reporting, you want to make sure that when the CEO talks about the fire truck, that's been correctly captioned, and so you need to introduce a little bit of a delay to make sure that the voice to text translation hasn't written the wrong thing and that's got pasted in. So it's quite possible to do live captioning. I think you can turn it on in Zoom here in this session if needed, quite effectively. But if you're doing it in certain contexts, you do need to make sure that you've got a pair of eyes over those captions before they go live, and that's something that needs to be considered. It's not completely trivial. Same with remote commentary. In fact, for DAZN, we built a remote commentary system which uses remote commentators who listen to the football games, listen to the sports events, and so on, and dub in their own language commentary and so on, which is brought back to the head end. And so on. So these techniques are possible to make the content more available to a broader audience, but they need consideration. You can easily have commentary which is completely out of sync, or you can have text which is coming up with swear words when you don't really want the CEO to be making the wrong statements, and so on and so forth. So yeah, lots of gotchas in there, but I don't think there's any one hard and fast rule. I could wax lyrical about a great system I was sort of on the periphery of being involved in the early 2000s, which put all the captioning into the Parliament live streams in the UK Parliament, and that used some clever systems where there were already what are they called? I want to call them stenographers, but that's probably wrong. But people typing in Parliament, taking very detailed Hansard, it's called Hansard, taking very detailed notes and so on, and then they were being married up with what was then an audio to text, like a teletext system, which was taking fuzzy captions, not very accurate captions, but using the presence of enough of those captions to marry that to the very accurately typed Hansard scripts to give very accurate captioning and make the content searchable, so you could search through parliamentary records in video and actually hunt down content. So lots of tips and tricks there. I don't know where I'm going with the comment, but
okay, how about
some
Steph?
thoughts about how to do captioning.
I want to make sure that we go into, because you mentioned Gen AI kind of on the top of the hour here. Is that something you get questions about a lot of the time in terms of live streaming and captioning?
Sure. Yeah. Look, for a lot of our customers have a vast amount of compliance needs, whether it's FCC, it's ADA, it's 508, it's WCAG 2.1 compliance. There's a lot of different compliance needs, and it depends on which customer we're working with. But if our customer has a level of development resources in-house, then my team will go in and help them potentially architect the use of some of our AWS native services for transcription or translation, to help them do it themselves and have those building blocks. There's also a very robust partner community that we work with that could meet our customers' needs as well. And so we really come in and try to offer what works for the customer and what their objective is and what they're trying to do. Some people want to own their destiny, and others want to just partner and plug in a third party to be able to do those types of things. And do you see Gen AI being, kind of a game changer within a lot of what we're seeing? I think you asked me the Gen AI question, but we see Gen AI being a game changer for a lot of different things. I guess as it relates maybe to the types of commentary, working with a customer like Fox Sports as an example, they were using Gen AI to, create what the commentator could say, utilizing stats and data that it pulled from whatever the play was on the game. So you could see the play on the game. Gen AI would generate kind of the script that they could hand off to a commentator who could then say, hey, did you see that play? And here's all the statistics that got pulled into something that then the commentator could speak about to the consumer. So to help fills in that storytelling element, and also gathering and garnering that data from a lot of the back-end data repositories that a lot of our customers have. I think you're on mute.
I know, I realize that. Are you using a
I'm gonna
delay?
throw in there that we do a lot of closed captioning, and we have been starting to use, I mean, exactly like Stephanie mentioned, like we are using, it depends if it's live and we're going to television as well. If it's all digital, sometimes we can do live AI captioning. But to Dom's point, you gotta, it's not perfect, right? Like it doesn't get everything right. So we, do all three. We have ICAP and coders. And so like for big events that are on TV as well as digital, we almost always have a human because it's easier to interact and integrate with them. But
Well, there's also the compliance piece of that too, that you want to make sure that you're,
exactly
in line with.
But that's how we've been using AI mostly in our world, is that, and to CJ's point, we're also now using it to find good place, because when we bring in, like when we're starting a new fast channel for someone, we have to load in all the content in order for them to start scheduling it. And we have to add ad breaks, right? So we got to find places to put ad breaks in. So we've actually, it's all running off on our AWS stack, but it's actually processing the video based on what they're saying and the closed captioning as well, and finding good places to put ad breaks in so that we can insert those dynamically instead of having doing it manually. So that's the two places that we see AI really making a difference, and it's just beginning. I mean, it's pretty phenomenal what it can do. I mean, how to turn it into money is a whole other issue. But
I want to follow up on this with CJ, because CJ, are you kind of comfortable with an ad break generated by Gen AI? Or
yeah, I'll take an ad break anywhere you can put it. So that's it. I mean, let me qualify that. It was really exciting to be in the booth with NAB this year, or at NAB this year with AWS. People call me a lot of times around context. So the two big products I was really excited about that you can build on Mediated Cloud from AWS is ad break detection. Because a lot of times at companies, like when I was at Local Now and we were taking, Russell would be getting that content or orchestrating that, I'd be receiving it and there would be no breaks. I would get VOD assets, no breaks. It's just, and there's still publishers out there that are doing arbitrary ad break insertion. So
a lot, yeah.
So that's still a thing. Oh, every 5 minutes, that's fine. It's in the middle of the movie. It won't matter. Like let's just get it live, right? Like get it live, understood. But now to see that AWS has things like ad break detection can be built off of Mediated Cloud. I'm also really excited to see how the contextual solutions that they, you can build in to your stack via AWS. That's another element coming from my background. Now, less about live, but the thing is that, and I was just saying this morning on Alan's panel, technology is catching up. Like the things we are talking about right now, some of this closed captioning, I talked to a guy about closed captioning in Stream TV, and it's just some of the stuff, still people hand typing, weeks and months ago in some cases, right? The technology is getting there, that to your point about having redundancies, you still have the checks and balances, but that it's getting smarter. When I was looking at solutions back at Telaria years ago around context and what they were generating, they're like, oh, you can show it's safe for kids, and then there'd be like the F word, right in the translation that they did, the analysis that they had done. Technology's gotten so much better. It's only going to get better. So I think that, what we dream now will, again, with the NAB conversation and context and ad break detection, how do we refine, the streams that it's not just, hey, let me just throw it up and I'll put a break where I can. How do we refine this, that it's actually the same experience you would get on television, get that parity, and then like a rocket ship, find the other things that we can now do with technology.
Okay. One of we've got a question from the audience, and we have very few minutes left, so I'm going to ask you guys to speak to this quickly. I'm going to go to Joe first, and the question is, what kind of metrics do you use to gauge when things are breaking and how? But realistically, or to gauge when things are working. Joe, your metrics?
I mean, the main stuff that we end up zeroing in on are watch time and engagement. Those are the two ones that come top of mind for us, just from the angle we're coming from. How long are we actually retaining people versus just, people who actually check in and check out? And then from an engagement perspective, how many people are not just passive viewers, but actively engaging with what we're streaming? So we got X number of comments, we got X number of people in fan zone, we got X number of people to click into this giveaway that we did during the game. Those are the ones that we're really focusing on. So watch time first and foremost, how are we keeping people in the door? And how are we ensuring that nothing happens in the streaming experience that gives them a second to leave or encourages them to leave? But also on top of that, active versus just, passive viewership, and finding that through engagement metrics is always a key focus for us.
Okay, in less than 1 minute, just so I can give everyone a chance. Steph, what about you? KPIs that you think, are going to help you at least show when something needs recovery, when something
Yeah, so
is-
I'll just, what I will say is, again, every customer is different, but what we recommend and what I would recommend is the in point and out point. You make sure that you have metrics of what you expect as an inbound and as an outbound metric at each step of the workflow. And that could be everything from ingest through the encode, transcode, through a multi-CDN stack. Am I delivering regionally to all the regions? Do I need to drop a CDN from the mix, et cetera? But looking at at each step of the workflow, get your inbound metrics, get your outbound metrics, and understand what they are, all the way through to things like engagement, or is everything making it to get clipped for like highlight clipping and replay and all sorts of other things. So I would just say, it all depends on your workflows, but just make sure you've got your in point and your end point.
Okay, again, Russell, 1 minute or less so that we can get
I would say
the other
latency
two
could be
people
great.
here.
It's almost, for us, it's almost a latency issue. Like something's taking too long and then it breaks, so it's like whether it's 19 milliseconds, or we have big alarms that go off when we're doing big streams with latency monitors in all the regions. And that's usually almost always something that we can get in front of real quick and fix. But that's the biggest issue for us as far as delivering video over IP.
Okay, CJ, you got less than a minute.
Yeah, no, riding the coattails of the content and the delivery teams, because when you understand how many concurrents you have and how many streams you have, you can guesstimate how many impressions you should have. So it's riding the coattails of the content and technical teams, and then impressions. So,
Okay.
Ad requests as well, but impressions, dollars, that's where it's at.
Okay, Dom, you got the last minute and a half, especially because
Lucky me,
you like this question.
I did like this question. So, with our clients using Norsk, tend to own quite a lot of the workflow. So we do everything from the sort of multi-camera signal acquisition into the composition in the cloud, and because that's quite an integrated process, right through to the handoff to the CDN. Sometimes we are the CDN as well. And we also use functional programming as a sort of core paradigm. It means everything's connected, and so we instantaneously know if something's broken, and we throw it away and replace everything that's subordinate to that point in the workflow. And so, to give you a good example, when we took over one of our financial clients' workflows, they used to have 7 engineers operating a whole array of functions within each broadcast. Now, one overseeing engineer typically oversees 12 live events at the same time from a remote call center, which is based in the Philippines. So if you build properly with the right programming paradigms, you don't necessarily need to feed data upstream to know it's gone wrong. You just need to know that downstream isn't there anymore, recreate the workflow instantly. I think probably the best example of that is we've had a situation where we were replacing the downstream workflow between every fading frame of audio, so 44,000 times a second, and we didn't know until we looked in the logs that it was going wrong that often. So it is possible. You might have to think about things in a slightly different way to normal.
Okay, unfortunately, we're out of time. And so I know you guys probably have a lot more stuff you could talk about live. And hopefully we have this conversation again, but thank you very much. And we have to hand this back to Evan. Thank you all for joining us.
You have no choice. That was great content, fascinating. My mind was blown several times, which hurts. So thank you all very much. If you loved this panel and the content that we've been streaming all day at Streaming Media Connect, 2024. Come back tomorrow, 10 a.m. The first panel is monetizing CTV and fast channels as walled gardens proliferate, a topic very close and near and dear to my heart. The winner of our walk-up music contest is Kool and the Gang by Kool and the Gang. Winner is Michiel Erdine Ochir. Congratulations. Thank you, Norsk by Ideas, for sponsoring this really fascinating panel. Thank you, Dom. And thank you, everyone, for attending this panel on all day. Come back tomorrow at 10 for our first panel. Thanks so much. Have a good night.
Thanks for having me.
Take care. Bye.